Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, featuring industry thought leaders sharing problem-solving insights to help grow your business and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stewart Andrew Alexander.
Hi, and welcome to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And during this segment of the show, I have mortgage banker Douglas Katz, Vice President and Certified Divorce Lending Professional of the Federal Savings Bank in Chicago. Now, Douglas, who is considered to be a leader in the area of financial services, will be talking to you today about the considerations for mortgage lending during a divorce. So, if you are one of the many divorcing couples in the Chicago, Illinois area, you might want to down tools, log out of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Come on, give yourselves a break. Grab yourselves a notepad and pen and get ready to take some notes and listen in to what Douglas has to share with us today. So, without any further ado, let's bring him onto the show. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. How are you today?
I am great and really appreciative you taking the time out of your busy day to Doug to come and speak with our listeners. So let's just jump feet first in, Doug. First question.
Right on.
Briefly describe the kinds of people who you serve and, the various types of situations they find themselves in when they come to you for your help.
Well, I work with a lot of different borrowers, but a primary focus of my business is working with people who are going through a divorce or after a divorce, who need to either disposition their marital home or buy a new home. And where they find themselves really depends on how quickly in the process of the divorce, not necessarily in the mortgage process, but in the divorce process, that they begin to think about a mortgage. They can find themselves in dire straits if they haven't thought about it until after the divorce decree. And a lot of the decisions have been made and things have been written, not in stone, but, legally signed by everybody, versus the people who have a good team, who collaborate, and maybe have a good network of people who know to refer them to the right people, right professionals. And as a result, everything is integrated and synced up as they move through that divorce and they come out and they're in the right position to either refinance that property or to buy something new.
Okay then, Doug, with that in mind, just as a reminder, anything that you share with us today is not legal advice or legal assistance. It is purely information. And I'm sure in all of the years that you've been out there working in the financial services sector, that you've come across many misconceptions. People come to you, they've been on Google, they've Googled something, or they've heard it from friends, colleagues, etc., and they believe it to be true. However, you know that in a lot of cases, it's not true. So I know there are many misconceptions, but could you just share with us the most common misconceptions that people come to you when they're seeking your help?
Absolutely. One of the biggest issues, and it's kind of an offshoot of the mortgage industry in general. Like, people get a mortgage and they kind of think it's this very, very smooth process, and it can be, but there's a lot of things that have to happen. It's amplified in a divorce, though, when they're not thinking about all the different steps. So they think that a divorce mortgage is just like any other mortgage transaction, and if they've been through one before, as an example, they're like, well, all I got to do is give my income and my assets and all that thing, and it's going to be just like it was before. Most people don't realize that the industry and those who generally do mortgage industry are really not equipped to manage all of the unique needs in the turbulent time for a divorced client.
Okay, so based on what you just shared with us then, Doug, and obviously keeping your client's confidentiality in mind, share an example of how you've helped someone who came to you with those misconceptions or with that challenge that you just described, and what kind of transformational results you were able to gain for them.
Well, the biggest thing that people sometimes trip over on divorce mortgage situations is that they're coming out of a divorce or they're in a separation, and that they're going to be able to use all their income. And as a result, they come to a lender and they say, the court is saying that I'm going to make this. And unfortunately, the Fannie Mae and the Freddie Mac world looks and has very, very specific requirements for the amount of time someone has been receiving that amount of separate maintenance or child support or unallocated support. And as a result, they think that they're going to qualify for a mortgage, and they get into the process and they find out that potentially none of their income applies. Now, in those situations, what I do with clients is typically find specialty programs where you're able to use income that's been out there for a short amount of time, or where you're able to account for assets in the settlement and create a revenue stream of income for that client to then be able to qualify for a loan. Sometimes it's a short-term solution, sometimes it's a longer-term solution, but generally the assumption that you're going to be able to use that all the time is the challenge.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Doug. That's a very useful insight that the listeners are certainly going to be able to benefit from. Now, as a reminder, today's topic is the considerations for mortgage lending during a divorce. Now, with that in mind, Doug, and for those divorcing couples out there wanting to know more, what's the most common but unknown pitfall that you'd like to bring to their attention today, regardless of what kind of situation they find themselves in?
Undoubtedly, to kind of take that thought further, it's income. It's typically the biggest issue, especially for the spouse who's probably maybe the non-breadwinning spouse or the non-primary breadwinning spouse who will be receiving, separate maintenance or alimony or unallocated support. And the guidelines for a lot of these programs, as I said, have very strict definitions for what can and cannot be used as income. And oftentimes, a client could be getting a certain amount of maintenance or a certain structure where maybe a CPA has been involved and they're doing it for tax benefit for maybe the spouse who's the breadwinning spouse. But what that does is it creates a situation where, potentially that classification can reduce or eliminate how that maintenance is calculated with respect to income.
Right, Doug, let me just take this in a different direction. Do you do some kind of free consultations when people initially reach out to you?
Absolutely. As I said before, I really have a passion for helping people, and it's all about that upfront part. So I would absolutely do often free consultations to any client who needs my help.
Okay, so with that said, when you think about those people who come to you for your help and they have a ton of different questions, at the end of those sessions, Doug, and when those people leave your office, what's the one question that you wish they would have asked you? What would that question be, Doug?
How do I get a house, really? What's a really interesting thing that I find is I've been really focusing on the mistakes that people make when they're entering into a transaction. Sometimes, and I had a client very just recently who thought that she was actually not going to be able to buy a home because she'd been given a whole lot of misinformation about those same guidelines that I talk about. So they're coming to me because I'm a professional like other professionals in the financial service industry, and they really need to say, how do I achieve this objective? Instead of getting down into the weeds, the question of how do I get from point A to point B? I'm in a house right now. How do I get to that next house, and what do I need to do to get there?
Fantastic. So how many years have you been working in the financial sector then, Doug?
I've been in the financial sector a little over 18 years.
So would it be safe to say that you've helped hundreds of people out there?
Absolutely.
With that said then, Doug, with you working with so many people, I just wonder, on behalf of the listeners out there, when you wake up in the morning, I don't know, maybe it's 5, 6, 7 a.m. in the morning, the alarm clock goes off, and you have a full day ahead of speaking and helping the people who you can help the most. After so many years and so many cases, is this something that still motivates you? How do you feel on a day like that?
I feel great. My job is to help people. So I never get tired of doing it. And one of the things that really, really drew me to the divorce part of this industry is the degree that you can help people, because it's an emotional time on the the side that I'm not on. And anything that I can do to provide stability from which they can take those next steps to, the next chapter of their life is great. And I can't tell you how happy my clients are when they, in the other case, when they find out they can buy a house and they didn't know they could, or when they find themselves in dire straits that you're able to help them. Oftentimes there's families, it's a divorce could be two people. It can be a whole family. And, I recently had helped a client about 2 or 3 months ago, put her family in a new home. And it was just, they were ecstatic. It was just it's such a reaffirming thing about why I got into this business.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Doug. I'm sure the listeners are going to find that useful to know just a little bit more of the personal side of what goes on in Doug's life. So, but in terms of your background, especially your formal background, can you just share a few moments sharing some information, your formal background, your education, and your experience as it relates to the topic of financial services, and especially as it relates to the people who we're speaking today, those divorcing couples out there?
Okay, fantastic. Thanks. Well, I have a BS from the United States Military Academy at West Point, and was a veteran I was in the Army for about 5 years. I'm a veteran and actually do a lot of VA loans for divorcing and non-divorcing clients. So I've really spent a lot of time in that industry. I also have an MBA from Loyola University, Chicago, where I focused in, among other things, financial services. In addition, I am a certified divorce lending professional, as you talked about, and there's an organization that really governs and trains lenders like myself in the specific challenges and pitfalls and requirements to provide a great mortgage experience and get a client in a home when they're going through a divorce situation. From the lending perspective, as I said, I've done a lot of VA in the 18 years that I've been in the industry. But beyond that, I've done everything from first-time home buyers, people just getting their start, to high net worth and ultra high net worth borrowers, where I've run teams at some of the larger institutions, both retail and on the high net worth side. So, while I would like to say I've seen everything out there and dealt with it, every day I find a new challenge and I help a new person. But I've definitely seen a lot out there. And as a result, the mortgage industry is a very interesting industry. There's what's on paper, there's that science, and there's the art. And in my 18 years, I've really kind of mastered the science to be able to bring the art to bear for my clients in problem solving and coming up with unique solutions that are going to meet their objectives.
So, Doug, I'd like you to just close your eyes for a second and picture the kinds of divorcing couples who come to you for your guidance, and they're wanting to dig a little bit deeper into their options for mortgage lending during a divorce. Now, with that picture in mind, Doug, what final thoughts would you like to share with them before we move on to our last question for today?
The big one that I always like to throw out when I talk to clients is, don't let the emotion of the divorce potentially create challenges with things like credit. I've seen a lot of situations where, because of whatever happened, there's a scorched earth approach. And even if everything else lines up, there's credit issues that take a lot of the options off the table. So the ability to disassociate the emotion going on with the impact later, if you let that emotion affect how you're dealing with critical assets. I mean, a house is usually the largest investment somebody will make. It's the largest asset that they own. And I see time and time again where people fight over who's going to pay the mortgage, and in the end, both people's credit scores end up way below where they need to be able to get them in a house. And it really makes it difficult then to help them.
Doug, why do I get the feeling that we're only scratching the surface of what you have to share with us today? So we are limited by time, unfortunately. So if there is somebody out there who wants to know more, they feel they need to know more about their considerations for mortgage lending during a divorce, how would they find you, Doug? How could they connect with you?
There's a couple easy ways. The first one would be I have a web page they can go to that's www.divorcelendingpro.com. On there is all my contact information and a short contact form they can fill out. I'm very sensitive to the fact that giving a lot of information at that time is difficult, and they're challenged with it. So all they got to get me is their name and phone number, and I can follow up. If they can't make it to that website, they can always call me at 708-829-1336, or they can reach me at dkatz@thefederalsavingsbank.com. Any one of those ways would give me a great way to get back to them and hopefully help them in their situation.
Fantastic. That's all we have time for today, Doug. So again, to all the listeners out there, that was mortgage banker Douglas Katz, fondly known simply as Doug to all his friends and colleagues out there. Thank you so much for sharing with us so generously today, Doug. You certainly have demonstrated without a doubt that you're a true educator, advocate, and trustworthy advisor for your client success. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You are so welcome, Doug. And you know something, Doug? Even more importantly, I'd like to say a big thank you to the listener. Thank you for joining us on this very insightful and informative discussion with what I can only describe as one of the leading mortgage bankers in Chicago, Illinois today. Again, that was Douglas Katz. Don't forget his name and make sure you do check him out. Give him a call, send him an email. Whatever you do, I am sure you are going to be in a good place to get started. So that's it, folks. Again, my name is Stewart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back shortly with some more leading financial service professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So, until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.